I want you to look at this picture closely. Notice anything weird? Well, notice the hordes of people trying to summit the tallest mountain in the world simultaneously as if going to shop at some off-season sale. Shocking, isn't it? As opposed to the popular belief, especially in India, that climbing Mount Everest is an extremely dangerous activity only meant for people with daredevil abilities. The activity has actually turned out to be a common adventure option now across the globe. If you see here, in the last 20 years, Everest has seen more than 10 times increase in visitors, with more than half of the total 10K summits coming in the last decade itself. The traffic in 2019 went so bad that when a record 876 people tried to summit it, it led to 11 fatalities just because of the traffic jam. But for an impoverished country like Nepal, the mountain has been growing into a multi-million-dollar industry and a valuable commercial asset, with people from Western nations vying to satiate their thirst for conquest in exchange for more than $1 lakh or close to a crore rupees to burn. Yes, you heard that right. More than a crore rupees. Heck, people don't get a home loan for 1 crore rupees in India, let alone burning it on some mountain climbing trip. So then what has made the Mount Everest evolve into such a big business? Why are people craving to climb the highest peak in the world as if it's like trekking to some local hill station? How and why exactly is the business of Mount Everest that has actually come to be over decades and thriving? Let's deep dive, analyze and discuss in today's episode. Chapter 1. The King of the Mountains. We all have been studying since our kindergarten classes that Mount Everest is the highest mountain in the world. But what we tend to forget is that there are other peaks standing tall above 8,000 meters as well, such as Kanchenjunga, K2, Lhotse, Makalu, etc. And all these are relatively 300 to 400 meters smaller than the Everest. Now, although Mount Everest is the tallest peak in the world, but the astonishing part around its summits and expeditions is that it's one of the least risky peaks as well. If you look at the graph here, you will be able to see that out of all the peaks which are above 8,000 meters in height, Everest has the highest expeditions count and the lowest death rate amongst all. In fact, its fatality rate stands almost at the end of the line amongst all the 8,000ers. So then the question that can be asked is that why is Everest so sought after, even though it's more distance to cover than the other peaks? Why does the mountain have such low death rate than other smaller counterparts? Well, to understand this, let's go through some geography on this map. If you see here, the second largest mountain K2 is located far north than the Everest and is located in the Karakoram range, which is a remote region with rugged terrain and extreme weather conditions. The region is known for its frequent and unpredictable storms, high winds and cold temperatures, because the region sits at the confluence of three major weather systems, including the Indian monsoon, the westerlies and the Siberian anticyclone, which as a result makes the weather extremely challenging for the expeditions. Coming back, now if we look at Kanchenjunga, which is the third highest peak located on the border of Nepal and India far east and is pretty secluded from its siblings. This makes the trek to the mountain far more remote and isolated. Adding to this, the Kanchenjunga region witnesses extremely volatile weather conditions, which makes it all the more difficult to summit, especially when compared to Everest. For the other mountains like Lhotse, Nanga Parbat and all, well, simply because the mountains do not fall under the top 3 highest peaks crown, people tend to lose interest in them. As a result, these do not receive much footfall and traffic. On the other side, the exponential growing interest in Mount Everest summits is majorly driven by a behavioral concept known as the peak end rule. This concept was introduced by famous psychologist and Nobel laureate in economics, Daniel Kahneman, and it states that people tend to perceive experiences based on their peak moments and how they end, rather than the overall experience as a whole. So summiting Everest always provides the climbers a sense of achievement and euphoria, which they always remember and share as their peak moment of the experience. Because after all, summiting the tallest mountain in the world is a gargantuan feat in itself. This is then further driven by the fact that post the summit, they were able to successfully complete and climb and return home safely, thereby contributing to a more positive ending, hence the name peak end rule. And the practical proof of this peak end rule can be seen in these figures, which clearly depict that over the course of time and looking over the window of post 2000s era, the success rate has more than doubled, whereas the death rate has come down. Not only this, the success rate has increased over all age groups and not just the younger demographics, with climbers in their 60s witnessing 1 in 3 odds as compared to 1 in 8 chance of reaching Everest summit. This clearly establishes that experiencing the peak end rule has become more and more significant for people with growing age, especially when it comes to expeditions to the top of Mount Everest. Chapter 2. Let us build and they will come. Alright, so we have cleared that why Mount Everest is more attractive for the people when it comes to expeditions. But how has this business been growing at such rapid rates? What has changed since Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norway first reached the top in 1953? Well, a lot actually. For starters, post the Norgay and Hillary summit in the decades that followed, Nepal and Tibetan government did not use to issue more than one expedition license per season. But then suddenly in the 1990s, things took a drastic turn. It was as if both the governments realized that behemoth 8,000 plus meter business opportunity lying there just in front of them, which as a result attracted people to mountains just like a moth to a flame. The rich folks discovered the concept of Sherpa support, which could drastically increase their chances to have once in a lifetime experience. But if you would have caught the twist in the story here, the rich folks were not the only ones with the revelation. You see, Sherpas is certainly one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. If you notice here, when compared with other occupations, the Sherpa profession has the highest death rate per 1,000 workers. In fact, of the total 304 deaths on Everest, 119, which is a staggering 34%, have been Sherpas. So it was just a matter of time that these hard-working and risk-taking Sherpas also discovered the path to business upon the realization that being the middleman is not going to make them rich. Setting up business certainly will. To understand this in more detail, let's take an example here. Let's say a Sherpa after decades of expeditions realized the business potential and set up his own expedition business and hired 20 more Sherpas, since expeditions usually work in a 1:1 Sherpa climber ratio, charging $65,000 for the service. So post some time now, these 20 Sherpas come to the same realization that being the middleman is either going to take them to their death or make them stay poor while taking on the dangers with every summit. So they set up their own shops as well. Now since there are 21 companies offering the same services, the competition has turned fierce, which has in turn led to some of the companies to offer their services in half the price at $32,000. So now if this company takes 20 such climbers up the summit, the revenue comes out to be $640,000, and if the operating expenses stand at even 60% of the revenues, the company is easily making $256,000 in profit. Not bad for a young Sherpa who was risking his life earlier, right? Following more on the lines of these businesses, another significant factor which has contributed towards the Everest summit is the different levels of summit Everest provides to its climbers. You see, Mount Everest has got 5 camps before you reach the summit, and every camp can serve you as your choice of summit point. So if someone isn't interested in going all the way to the top and just wants to have a taste of Everest trekking, then they can choose to summit to either of the camps and achieve their peak end rule there itself. So as a result of these camps, then there are all these businesses swirling around them as well, charging basis the equipment so required and Sherpa experience you seek. Hence it's safe to say, just like the startup culture has been proliferating, the business of Mount Everest has been proliferating as well. And despite a growing number of overcrowding concerns, the government is eager to maximize its revenue and has refused to put a cap on the number of permits issued per year. This has led to a vicious cycle of intense competition, leading to cheap expedition packages. As a result, more and more people flocking to Everest every year. Growing an industry is always a good thing, but when it involves risks and dangers to the lives of people, there should be a regulation in place, and Mount Everest is in dire need of one. And that was the episode, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked it, please hit that like button below and subscribe to the channel for more such enriching content. I'll see you all in the next episode. Mindfulness signing off.